keep him in it, but leave him, My goodness, y'all use that name a lot.
If he calls temporary losses,
Alright, so let's start some notes. Today we're going to, I'm ignoring it. We are going to talk about the radicalization part of the French Revolution. Not the most horrific part, that would be the Reign of Terror. But today we are going to talk about the radicalization. So what did y'all think about the video?
It was terrible.
Terrible? I would think it would be horrible.
It was, I liked it.
Get it? It was a horrible history video? Horrible history? I love horrible histories. I learned a lot from horrible histories. How would you like to eat grass?
I would
I
like to.
No, I tasted it through.
I mean, dirt.
You don't think like But grass would hurt us if we ate it.
I would, although except for the fact that you're not used to it and it's not clean.
It's got chlorophyll. And
All plants have chlorophyll.
Well, it's
That's
gonna
what
hurt
they
you.
agree. Not necessarily. Lettuce has chlorophyll in it.
Huh?
I think it's chlorophyll. Is it chlorophyll?
Yeah, it makes it green.
Yeah, I think
If we eat grass, I should know it's contain.
No, Isabel,
it doesn't have
It
doesn't have nutrient value that we need adequately for our body. However, how would you like to be so poor that that's all you've got to eat, literally?
But like you said, we're not used to it, so it
See,
would
all I had was huevos, frijoles, and tortillas.
I'd get food. Oh, well, stop.
Todo bien.
All right, so let's talk about the radicalization of the French Revolution. Okay, there are some phases, 4 phases of the French Revolution, which we'll talk about. Yesterday we talked about the kind of liberal phase. All right, yesterday we talked about the liberal phase. Guys, you're going to see this little graphic organizer several times today, so I'm not going to give you time to write the whole thing down. Right? But 4 different phases. You have the liberal phase, the radical phase, the directory phase, and the Napoleonic phase. Probably the least interesting phase would be the directory phase, and we'll talk about that a little bit. There's going to be 2 parts to the radical phase that we're going to talk about. Today we're going to kind of introduce to you, and then tomorrow, for sure, we're going to kind of go into what is known as the Reign of Terror. The Reign of Terror. That's the really scary part. That's why they called it the Reign of Terror. Everybody was subject to death. Just about everybody. We'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow. From 1791 to 1793, we see a shift in viewpoints. We see a shift from Locke's ideas to Rousseau's ideas. Okay? So what do we mean by that? Simply, during the liberal phase, we focused on John Locke and Montesquieu. We kind of focused on the change of government, or at least why we needed a change of government. The dominant class being the bourgeoisie. Remember the bourgeoisie we talked about is that upper middle class, right? The professional class, if you will. Remember we talked about that? We talked about even at Karl Marx, we'll kind of go against it. But the bourgeoisie, again, is who kind of led the liberal phase of it, the change from the absolute government to the constitutional government, right? Focused on changing the governing bodies to the National Assembly and then Legislative Assembly. National Assembly being strictly a representative body to the Legislative Assembly actually legislating and making laws. The goals of the liberal phase were to build a constitutional monarchy. Not necessarily get rid of the monarchy, but to build a constitutional monarchy. To take the power away from the king and give it to who in a constitution?
The people.
The people. Okay? The people. Very important, right? Very important to recognize that. So we're going from a top down to a bottom up, right? In a constitutional government, the right to rule is given by the people. Any questions on that? All right, so moving into the radical phase, what we're going to see is the dominant groups, the Jacobins, okay, the Jacobins, and the sans culottes. Y'all know what culottes are, right? Y'all know what culottes are? Huh? Don't wear them, especially you girls. Now it's becoming popular with men again, though. So they're capris. Capri pants. That's capri pants, right? Some of the goals are moving more to an egalitarian. When we say egalitarian, what do we mean? Egalitarian simply means equal, okay? Equal, okay? More of a nationalism and providing for everyone. The influences are Rousseau. We briefly introduced again Rousseau's ideas that everyone is born free, right? Everyone has freedom. Everyone has the rights. The governing bodies we're going to see is the National Convention and the Committee on Public Safety. Committee on Public Safety, very interesting since they like to kill people. We ready? All right, let's move on. So let's introduce you to something called Le Chapier Law. Okay, Le Chapier Law in 1791. It was really the last stand of the liberals, the last stand of the bourgeoisie. It is important to note, though, that this liberal phase was very important. Throughout history, any change comes in phases. We can see that in the civil rights movement, right? We can argue that the Civil War was the beginning of the civil rights movement, because right after the Civil War, you had the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, which freed the slaves, constitutionally freed the slaves, constitutionally made all colors, regardless of race, citizens, and constitutionally allowed them to vote. However, then we went backwards a little bit with Jim Crow laws, and eventually, gradually, we're getting more and more and more rights for African Americans in particular, but thanks to the African American civil rights, it goes on to other races as well, right? It happened in phases, well over 100 years. It happened much quicker in France, thanks to the French Revolution, one of the reasons that it is kind of so important, right? But the liberal phase, very important to the rest of the phases. If you didn't have a liberal phase, these other phases would not have happened, right? So the last stand of the liberals, something called the Chapier Law, okay? And one of the things that it did is it forbade guilds, worker combination unions, and strikes. It did away with those. Guilds, or forbade guilds, and allowed for unions and strikes. For the most part, you can think of a guild as kind of a union. If you were a blacksmith, you were part of the blacksmith's guild. And it was illegal for you to hire someone that was not a member of that guild. Does that make sense? So whatever occupation you lived in, you had, by law, you had to become a member of the guild, that certain guild. Am I making sense? Are y'all following me there, okay? And if you were not part of that guild, you did not get work, all right? Which made it unfair for younger blacksmiths and artists and people who were not yet a part of the guilds. It was a very strict, in some ways it was good, in some ways it provided quality of work and things like that. However, it did not allow you, because it was kind of a socioeconomic thing as well, because guilds were first started to really master a trade, to help people master a trade. It was their way of educating. What it turned into is a club or a clique that would not allow certain people in there, and especially with it being against the law, it really became a privilege type thing. Does that make sense? You understand what I'm saying? Okay? So by privilege, in other words, what would you like to do for a living? Yep. You want to what? But if you're not part of the doctor's guild, regardless of how much education, regardless of how much training, you could not be a doctor. You could be the best one ever available, right? However, they would not let you be a doctor simply because you're not in the clique or the guild. So that's what I mean by privilege. Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay? So it turned into something not that you're not qualified, it's just not that you're not part of us. That becomes a problem because it kept people in their classes, so to speak. You know, if you were a peasant, you were a peasant for life. If you were a part of the working class, then you're a part of the working class for life. And you're in that station of life because of birth. The guilds helped to hold that in, and they wanted to do away with that. So one of the goals of the Shapir Law, okay, is to reduce the influences of the urban masses. What do we mean by urban masses? Again, those guilds, right? Those guilds created a situation, again, where people stayed in their station in life, did not allow for equality, regardless of your ability, right? But you're there, you stay there. One of the reasons that we provide public education is to allow people to better themselves, right? It shouldn't matter where you're born at. It shouldn't matter where, how much money your family makes. Public education is all about providing equality for everyone, right? Now, certain circumstances may not provide the best for everyone, right? So it's all about breaking free of where you're at in life and moving on. Does that make sense? Okay? That's in its most basic form. One of the things that we're going to see with the French Revolution is the crowd will gain control. Okay? The people will gain control. All right? And get it. Key events of 1791, very important here. Key events, write these down very quickly. You're going to see these again because we're going to kind of talk about each one of them. June, the introduction of Le Shapir Law, the flight to Varennes. Ooh, you need to write even. Here we go, some key events. We talked about Le Shapir Law. You're gonna see it through the slides, I promise. The flight to Varennes. Louis and his family attempt to flee Paris. Okay. They actually get dressed up in disguises, not elaborate disguise or anything, but more in peasantry clothing. However, they take their Rolls Royce of carriages along with them, so I don't know who that they were trying to fool anyone, right? Some sources say that they took the royal carriage, even though they were dressed up, trying to fool people. Okay, but they attempt to flee Paris, and they want to go to Montmedy. Montmedy is a fortress, okay? It is a fortress or citadel. Citadel is really a big fortress, a place for training troops and things like that. And their goal is to build an army there to fight the revolution, to take back complete control. He's losing control. He feels he's losing control. He doesn't think it is too late yet. So the purpose to go to Montmedy is to go to this citadel and raise an army. Yes. Hey. Montmedy. It's right there on this slide. Montmedy. Military officers at Montmedy. It's right there. Okay. Royalists. Royalists are those who agree with the monarchy, right? Side with the monarchy, the royal. Wanted to launch a counter-revolution to stop this ensuing revolution. Alright? So they get caught, alright? They get caught, and they are brought back to Paris in a not-so-triumphant return, okay? Again, remember his goal was to come back and squash the revolution. It was not so triumphant for Louis the 16th, which leads to the Declaration of Pillnitz, which Austria signs an agreement with Prussia and Austria, both of whom are still absolute monarchies. sign an agreement that if anything happens to Louis XVI, they will declare war, okay? They will declare war with France if anything happens. Again, this is in 1791. Little more than a decade past the American Revolution, right? About 14, 15 years, not even the ending of it, though. So the Declaration of Independence, Austria and Prussia signed an agreement and pledged to attack France if Louis XVI is threatened. This is where Louis XVI is no longer King of France, but King of the French. He is strictly, remember yesterday we talked about him turning into the office of the king, turning into more strictly a ceremonial role. Kind of like the Queen of England now. The Queen of England now really has no political, she has some influence, I won't say that, but she has no political power really whatsoever. It's strictly ceremonial. Strictly ceremonial, okay? She has some job duties, some requirements that she has to fulfill with that office, but it is strictly ceremonial. No longer King of France, but now King of the French. Do you understand the difference? The King of France means that he can make political decisions, that is, he is ruling. King of the French is simply he is a symbol of France. Does that make sense? He's strictly ceremonial. He looks the part. Does that make sense? Louis the 16th, the king. Okay? I want you to look at that picture real quick. There's some very important pieces of this picture. If you notice the pictures of Louis the 16th before as king, he's pictured as a strong man, right? More of a slender guy. Here he's pictured as kind of a portly fellow, right? The fat cat of the world. Overweight guy who is kind of sitting in his office eating all day long while the rest of the country is starving to death. Does that make sense? You see where I'm going with that? Also, notice the red cap that he has on, that red toboggan style cap. You notice in the horrible histories, after the wife swap, they kind of come at the end of the video, they had that red hat on. That red hat was a symbol of the revolution. Look on King Louis's hat there. There is a badge, or the more, you may also see the term cockade, right? Cockade. That is a cockade, that blue, white, and red. Colors of France, colors of liberty, colors of equality, colors of fraternity, all right? Also a major symbol of the revolution. He is painted here. This painting here symbolizes Louis XVI kind of coming under control of the revolution. He did appear after his capture. He did appear in outfits similar to this with the red hat on. Some sources say that he was forced to. Other sources say that he did it willingly to show his cooperation and support for the revolution. Super important to know, though, that King Louis XVI is now coming under the control. He is no longer King of France. He is now King of the French. Symbolic kingship, symbolic royalty, the chief of state, if you will, the chief citizen, if you will. Does that make sense? Everybody understand what I'm saying? Strictly ceremonial from this point on. Yes, ma'am. No, they have brought him to Paris. Remember the Women's March we talked about yesterday? Took them from Versailles to the capital in Paris. They were not allowed to leave whatsoever. That's the reason his fleeing from was such a big deal. Okay? The States General turned to the National Assembly, now turns to the Legislative Assembly. The word legislative is very important there because it is changing from a representative body, from a advisement type position, if you will, into a we're making the law body. Okay, We are the lawmaking body in France. We are the Congress of France. We are the Parliament of France. Are y'all following me? Is that making sense? If somebody understands what I'm saying, say, oh yeah. I like y'all talking to me a little bit, okay? The National Assembly dissolved itself in 1791. A legislative assembly was elected by universal manhood suffrage. Universal manhood suffrage. Very important. What is suffrage? The right to vote. Okay? Universal meaning what? Everyone. Okay? Everyone. Manhood meaning what?
Every man.
As long as you are not female, you can vote. Very important distinction here between the National Assembly and the Legislative Assembly. The National Assembly was again an appointed body. They were not voted into office. The Legislative Assembly, however, was voted into office. You do understand the difference, right? The people got to choose. It was no longer by birthright, but the people got to choose. Does that make sense? You understand me? Say, uh-huh. If you don't understand me, say, whoa. All right. Who said that? Are you messing around with me? Do you not understand it? Taylor? Okay. Something else that is very important is, and to keep the same people from ruling the government, they did not allow those members of the National Assembly to be a part of the Legislative Assembly. Why not? They wanted to make sure that they're doing away with the old regime. I kind of wish that we would do that in Congress. I kind of wish that they would make a law real quick for this one election. If you have ever served in Congress, you cannot go run for office again right now. That way we get new people in there who are not afraid to follow the political junk and get in there and do something for us. Oops, I allowed my opinion to slip through. Let's move on. Oh well. So phases of the French Revolution. The liberal phase, radical phase is what we're beginning. So let's talk a little bit about the radical phase and the Jacobins. The Jacobins are really, think of them as a political party, if you will. A faction, right, of people who believe a certain way. The Jacobins were broken down into two different factions, okay? One of them was very, very, very radical. And instead of me assuming, do you know what radical means? Right? Okay? If you are radical, think of it this way. We call radical Muslims what? Terrorists. We call radical Muslims terrorists. If there are people committing terrorist acts in the name of Islam or because of a Muslim religion, we refer to them as terrorists. Okay? Now, I wouldn't go so far as to say that all of the Montagnards were terrorists. Okay? However, think of it this way. We are fixing to enter into a phase of the radical phase called the Reign of Terror. Okay? And we're going to talk about that. And then there are those, the Girondins. Do what? Right, kind of come from that region, exactly. Kind of come from that region, who are less radical. And we're going to see how the more radical and the less radical fit in together with this. But the Jacobins, what they really want is they want a complete change of the way everything is done in France. And by everything, I mean everything. Okay? Everything. Except maybe farming practices because they've done that forever and they know how to grow food. Okay? Alright? But they're wanting to go to a form of government called republicanism, which is completely different from monarchy. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not a democracy in the United States. We are a republic. We are a republic. We're a democratic republic, which means we vote into office people to make decisions for us. Right? What law can you make right now? What law can your parents make right now?
They can do something.
They cannot put anything into law. Now they can influence and introduce by doing what? By going to the people who they voted into office and making recommendations, right? But we have voted in senators and congressmen to make the laws for us. Does that make sense? That is a republic. We are not a democracy. We are a republic. Okay? So you can never use that. We're a free country. We're a democracy. We are not a democracy. Okay? We are a republic. We have voted into office people who make decisions for us. Completely different from a monarchy. Okay?
To be honest, most of the people that say we're a free country don't even know that we're a democracy.
But we're not a democracy. We are a republic. Okay? So here's kind of what the Legislative Assembly looked like. And what I want you to see here is we're going to move. Notice the left wing, and by left wing we mean the more radical, the much more liberal, okay? More liberal. The right wing being conservative. Notice here, the Legislative Assembly, the Jacobins are in the minority or majority? Definite minority. There's less of them. There are still more constitutional monarchists in the Legislative Assembly. That's what I want you to get out of this slide. Notice the dates there are 1791 and 1792. Okay? 1791, 1792, we see more constitutional monarchies. Moderates are the majority, really. Okay? And less Jacobins, or those radical. And then I told you we're going to talk about the sans-culottes. Notice the culottes. And really all I want you to notice from this picture is notice the style of dress, if you will, of the people on the right. Culottes simply mean breeches or breeches. Okay? You ever heard of the term breeches? I'm sure you have. By breeches, we're referring to your pants. That's exactly right. Your pants. Okay? So with your pants, all right, notice those on the right. Do they look like they are dressed better than those on the left, or does the left look like they're dressed better than those on the right? Which one's dressed better? The right, exactly. Notice the length of their pants.
It's to them.
Do what?
I'm just saying, the left side look dirty.
Okay. It's to their knees. Culottes are knee breeches, okay? Knee breeches, all right? It's the term we use is capris, right? They come just past the knees. Again, notice the one on the left, their sans-culottes are what? Long pants, right? Long pants. So the sans-culottes are the working class. Those in the working class need longer breeches to protect their legs, all right? So that's why they become known as the sans-culottes. Okay? The sans-culottes, or the working class, are starting to rise in power. Okay? The sans-culottes without breeches, remember those breeches are really the knee pants. Okay? Breeches are really knee pants. Alright? They are the working class. So they became the symbol. Not only the symbol, the reason they became the symbol is because they really became the backbone of this radical phase of the French Revolution. And by this, I'm talking about they're the ones who really pushed forward with it. They're the ones who went forward, and the working class really took hold of this revolution. Are you following me? Okay. So they became the backbone. Events in 1792. Again, I'm going to just move forward because we're going to talk about all of these, okay? Just moving forward because we're going to talk about all of these, and we're running a little short on time today. So the French Revolutionary Wars. (1792 to 1802), there was a lot of chaos. France is going to go to war with different nations. The reason we call them the French Revolutionary Wars, guys, is because they happened during the French Revolution, okay? So it is, in some fairness to say, one of the reasons that we don't hear a lot about the army during this time You think of the American Revolution, it's the Continental Army fighting the British Army, right?
Right.
Well, here, the French Revolutionary Wars, during this time, being in Europe, there were a lot of countries going to take advantage of the civil war going on in France, the Revolutionary War going on in France, and try to overtake them, okay? So it kept the army occupied. There becomes a statement in 1792. The Duke of Brunswick writes what's called the Manifesto, and he makes it his goal to put the revolution down, okay, and restore King Louis to power, okay? So he is a revolutionist, right? No, he's not a revolutionist. He is a royalist, okay? He is a royalist, someone who sides with the monarchy, okay? So he wants to restore King Louis XVI to power, okay? So obviously I would say he's probably someone who is getting a lot of privileges, right? Okay, so King Louis XVI, restore him to power and resist or put down the revolution altogether, okay? That's the Brunswick Manifesto. All right, here is a cartoon that is a answer or reply, if you will, to the Brunswick Manifesto. Let me just say there is a blurry spot there for a reason, okay? He is mooning the Brunswick Manifesto or the Duke of Brunswick himself, okay? So I'll give you a moment to write this down. The armies compared, okay? Comparing the Constitution armies to the French armies, okay? I said Constitution, I'm sorry, I meant coalition. Coalition armies. The coalition armies, the reason we call them a coalition is because these are coming from different regions, if you will, of France, coming together to fight the French army. Okay? French armies are very patriotic, are very, we believe in our country, right? We believe in our country and we want to see the best for our countries. They came out in very large forces and volunteered to overrun and overthrow the armies. The coalition armies, much smaller, however, they were trained and experienced soldiers, and by professional we mean what? If you are a professional, you what? You get paid. You get paid, okay? They were professional soldiers who got paid. Not really mercenaries, because they're part of our military is considered a professional army, but not mercenaries. Mercenaries don't really have any loyalty, so to speak, to ties. They're private armies. Ours are considered public professional armies because they're willing to fight for our country. However, we do pay them. What did you say, Lakai? Shall we find out? In September, we have what's called the September Massacres. We're starting to get into a little bit of the Reign of Terror, the beginnings of the Reign of Terror, not completely the Reign of Terror yet. There were mass execution of political prisoners in Paris. Political prisoners, those who agreed with the monarchy. Okay? By political, those who agreed with the monarchy. All right? We see a rising force of those that are trying to take over France again and trying to restore the monarchy. So let's just get rid of them altogether in an attempt to instill fear to try to sway people's minds. Okay? The proclamation of the French Republic in September 22nd, 1792. This is a document, again, similar to our Declaration of Independence somewhat, that really declares France a republic. We are not a monarchy any longer. We are now the French republic. Okay? Does that make sense? Simply the official announcing of there is no monarchy, we are a republic. And that right there is a form of currency in front of you, right? With the legal French Republic signals and stuff. The king is deposed, simply meaning he is kicked out of office. Yes, ma'am. Correct. Correct. The king is deposed. Yes. It depends on whose side they were on, really. Depends on whose side they were on. Most of the political prisoners at the time of Bastille, though, were against the monarchy. So, depending on what they were in jail for, no doubt were probably released. There's not much historical record on that, though. Not much. Okay? So the king is deposed, and by deposed we mean kicked out of office, basically. He is no longer a king. He now, instead of King Louis XVI, he becomes Louis Capet. Capet being his last name, so to speak. Capet. They give him that last name. He's no longer king, he is now citizen. You follow me? Okay? So he is just like everyone else. Just like everyone else. Alright? The National Convention, notice the National Convention, how it changes. Where before the constitutional monarchists had much more, notice now that we see a lot of Jacobins in there, right? The Girondins on the right and the Montagnards on the left. I think it's actually pronounced Montagnards. There was not. Remember, we are now a republic. Okay? So what we're seeing here is we're in a transition period of no one in that executive office, so to speak. But that won't last long. Won't last long. Okay? Just notice, you don't have to write this down, but notice how the National Convention, Legislative Assembly is changing. Okay? Notice how it is changing. Alright? Louis XVI is tried for treason. What is treason? Exactly right. When you go against your country. So the king, former king, is tried for treason. There are 33 different charges that they charge him with. King Louis XVI is tried for treason at the end of 1792, beginning of 1793. And guess what happens? There are two factions in this trial. Remember, the Jacobins are broken down, the Republicans are broken down. Those most radical want to execute him. The least radical do not want to execute him. He has been made a citizen. Let's put him in jail where he is basically of no effect. However, history tells us that when a king is imprisoned or even exiled, sometimes that they can raise an army elsewhere, be broken out of jail, and taken back over, right? So because of this fear, the most radical win, and he is executed on January 1793. By guillotine. Have y'all ever seen a guillotine at work? Okay, well I won't show you the total graphics of it. However, 1793. The date exactly was, it just says January 1793. Okay, so, we're going to. Actually, I think y'all have to, right? Can y'all play this one? Headphones again and play.
Wait, I can play it.
What is it?
No, it's about to start now.
So this becomes the propaganda poster for France. The writing there is on the right: unity, indivisibility, and republic, liberty, equality, fraternity, or death. Again, the top, we saw the hat a minute ago on Louis XVI, on the chubby Louis XVI, regard no doubt. The hat with the cockade there in the middle becomes a symbol of republicanism, the French flags, the colors of France, and then we have the national motto written there. And the national motto for France: liberty, freedom, equality, everyone is equal, and fraternity. Again, what does fraternity mean?
Brotherhood.
Brotherhood, right? Literally everyone working together, cooperating together for a common goal. We have turned fraternities into drunken college campuses, or drunken clubs on college campuses. However, there are fraternal organizations who work together to raise money for charities. Okay? However, there is one last part as we begin to enter into what is known as the reign of terror. It's liberty, equality, fraternity, or death. You choose. You choose. Do what?
Is that where the give me liberty or give me death came from?
No, that was actually Patrick Henry who said that, right? Way before. Now, like almost 20 years before this. Not quite 20 years, but more than a decade for sure before this. Now, however, did it have influence on this? Quite possibly, right? But instead of give me liberty or give me death, they're going to say give me liberty or you die. Will be the difference. Okay?
Well, they
Any
have
questions?
like an iPhone.